You're listening to NT Paranormal After Dark. Nothing normal about it.
So I think we should start by you telling us about what you read on the Cleburne page today.
Okay.
And why does that make you so angry? I don't understand.
It doesn't make me angry.
It doesn't, because I saw your face twitching while you told it. You're, a little bit like that.
So I'm in a kind of town gossip board. Cleburnites talking. I like
Cleburnites. Is that what you are called?
Yes.
The Cleburnites.
Yeah. It's synonymous with douchebag. But there was a thread on there where someone was asking about paranormal activity in town. And people were mentioning the normal stuff. Old Foamy, the Wright Plaza, the hospital. And someone mentioned the high school, which got me interested because when I was about 14, we used to skip band practice, and we would hide under the stage and tell ghost stories. So I tell this one ghost story about this guy that fell off the stage during the building of the PAC, the auditorium at the Cleburne High School. Now, as far as I know, no one died during the construction. But so I tell this story, and about 6 months later, one of my friends claims to have seen this ghost, because I didn't tell them I made it up. I told them it was true. But while I'm reading this thread,
because you're phony,
I'm reading this thread on the Cleburne page, and someone says during construction, someone fell off the balcony and died at the PAC. People see his ghost all the time. Like, oh God.
So this is on the heels of our last episode about urban legends, and that was one of my big questions: is what is the genesis of an urban legend? Do these people know they started it?
Apparently, it's a stupid 14-year-old telling a ghost story, and people going, "That's a thing."
Because how many years ago was that?
20.
So it's persistent. How many classes have
I don't know, but I the guy who posted it. I went and looked at his page. He's 17 years younger than me.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, maybe he was in my grade. Okay, but no.
So now that we're at the genesis of an urban legend, what was your purpose in creating the urban? Because we wanted to ask, why did you start this?
To freak the people out.
What was your plan? There you go.
The people that were down under the stage with me.
I guess that answers that question, because we were like, why did you start this to raise awareness or whatever? No, I'm just an a-hole.
Basically, everybody was telling ghost stories. I told one that was based on the location.
The thing is, that one's common too, because I have never been in a school auditorium that wasn't haunted, or the theater area.
I've been to school there for I'd probably been going there for about 9 months when I told the story, and I'd never heard a story about the PAC. I mean, for all I know, there was a pre-existing ghost story, but I had never heard one. So I don't know. I never saw anything in the PAC, and I used to put gum over the doors and sneak in there at night.
Well, you glossed over the reason that it even picked up traction. Didn't it get in the school paper or something?
Someone else put it in the school paper.
So what you're trying to tell me is you're trying to take credit for somebody else's urban legend.
A friend of mine put it in the school paper and credited me as a witness, but didn't credit me with the story.
Mm-hmm. So today, what we're talking about is neuroscience related, and this is this is just after we got our EEG unit, and we've been playing with it for a few days back and forth, and really, mostly what we've been doing is trying to blow up this little barrel with our minds, because it's got this game in there that it measures all your brain waves or whatever, and your attention and your concentration and your meditation. You're supposed to be able to focus in. You can either set a barrel on fire and make it explode, or you can make this little ball hover, if you meditate. And we even let Kat play with it last night. How are you doing at it, by the way?
Great.
I'm
doing great.
Have you noticed any improvement in your X-Men powers?
I haven't tried. Not since last night.
Not at all?
Not since last night.
You are all over the map on that thing. You can see,
apparently I have the ADD.
Yeah, really bad. It's funny. But, one of the things we always talk about, on the show and in our experiments and stuff, is we always talk about, the psychological reasons that people might think they're having a paranormal experience. Psychosis and depression and sort of things like that. But what we don't really talk about is like the biology of the brain. How's your game?
I'm paying attention.
Pay all the attention. Oh my God, this is why you're failing all the EEG games. Give me the phone.
No.
Give me the phone.
I need it because I took
You need it?
screenshots.
Did you just say you need it?
You had me taking notes on all the brainwaves. There's a comment. And so you can't take my phone because then I won't be able to read the comments.
But you don't have the comments up.
I will.
Turn it off.
No.
Turn it off.
No, I'll let it run. I won't look at it.
You are the worst. And this is why we find nothing on our adventures. It's because of you.
I'm pretty sure we find nothing because there is nothing.
No, I'm pretty sure we find nothing because the attentiveness gauge on the EEG is consistently below like 30 when you're hooked up to it.
I have a trick for getting it high.
Well, what's your trick?
I sing a Macklemore song in my head.
How does that help in an
don't
investigation? So anyway, what I was looking at, and one of the reasons we wanted to get the EEG is because the reason we got the specific EEG we got is because it's Bluetooth, so it can be worn remotely, like in the field when we're doing stuff. And we wanted to see how the brain reacted in situations where we think we're having a paranormal, like, oh, I heard something or I saw something, things like that, to see if there was any changes in brainwave activity. And so what I quickly learned is I know lots of things. I'm not a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
And so you're the closest to actually being able to interpret anything that we get out of this to the point. Well, like, we've got our new procedures that we're doing with you and Casey.
With a map.
You read it just fine yesterday.
Because it's color coded.
Anyway, what I was curious is how the brain reacts when you're hallucinating, because that's the common thing. When somebody says they see an apparition, it gets blamed, oh, you were hallucinating or whatever. And I got to thinking about it, and I could only think of one time that I have ever hallucinated. And so I got to looking at, because I was curious what the definition of it was, because are you hallucinating when you daydream? Are you... do you only hallucinate when you're on drugs? What's the line between...
Well, I know a lot of people... I don't get it, but a lot of people that have insomnia get hallucinations after like 2 or 3 days without sleep. I've never gotten them, but...
And I always think of hallucinations as like a visual sort of thing. Oh, I see this like trippy effect, or I see something. How's the range though? Oh, it should go to about 40 feet. With normal obstructions should go a little bit further.
Walk around with the laptop. I actually downloaded some apps to my phone.
Yeah, you can monitor with the phone too.
Out of the team members, who is most likely to have a paranormal experience?
I don't know. It varies from place to place, to be honest. I used to say Allie, but not as much anymore. I don't know. Probably one of us, because of the numbers game.
Yeah, we go on the most.
Yeah, we go, because we're always on, like, every investigation.
But we tend to trade off.
Yeah. And it also depends on mood, state of mind.
We also end up the most isolated.
We do the most isolation experiments between the two of us.
And we're the only ones that go out, just you and me.
Right.
Very seldom are you taking Allie or Casey out by themselves, because of their work schedules. Yeah.
Well, and Casey's always outside of the experience part of the experiment.
Yeah.
For the most part. Allie's always in it, but she doesn't really do a whole lot of the isolation stuff ever. So
she used to be the most likely, but it seems like she's gotten pretty immune to.
I think that's just something that happens over time. But that's more of a psychological immunity, as opposed to like the biological stuff that I was looking into. I was kind of surprised by what... Really?
No.
Really?
Theta waves.
So, welcome to our show on addiction.
Theta waves. That's what you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, you just jump like to the end of the thing because you're trying to throw keywords. Do the damn thing. I was pretty surprised at like how it describes hallucinations, because it hadn't occurred to me that they're not all visual, and it seems pretty obvious. But like you can have tactile hallucinations and
auditory
and phantom smells, like Cat does. Throwback to conversation yesterday. Hallucination is the perception in the absence of external stimulus that has qualities of real perception. Hallucinations are vivid, substantial, and are perceived to be located in external objective space. They are distinguishable from several related phenomena such as dreaming, which does not involve wakefulness, pseudo-hallucination, which does not mimic real perception and is accurately perceived as unreal, illusion, which involves distorted or misinterpreted real perception, and imagery, which does not mimic real perception, is under voluntary control. Hallucinations also differ from delusional perception, in which correctly sensed and interpreted stimuli is given some additional and typically absurd significance. Hallucinations can occur in any sensory modality: visual, auditory, olfactory, gustatory, tactile, proprioceptive. Man, there's more than 5 senses here, so I'm really thrown off. There's some really big words. Equilibrium perceptive, thermoperceptive, I guess feeling like heat or whatever.
Cold and then dizziness.
Yeah, and chronoceptive.
Basically,
and
if it
then mild
exists, you can
hallucinations are
hallucinate it.
Do it? Yeah. So hallucination is defined as any experience that you're having that's I'm going to say tactile, even though that's the wrong word, but it's something out of your own senses, like you're experiencing it like you would the rest of the environment, but there's nothing there to trigger it. It's completely internal and in your brain,
Kat says she didn't get the smell. It was her friend.
Whatever. I think her friend made the smell and was trying to blame it on something else. I don't know. Must be a demon. Anyway.
Go ahead.
No, I just like dead silence.
Is that your favorite thing?
Yeah. Hypnagogic, whatever. But so, like, I was trying to differentiate between like somebody, because that's the go-to is like, I saw an apparition. Well, are you sure you weren't hallucinating? Well, that's a really tough question, because at the core of it, what is hallucination? Because according to most everything I read, is hallucinations aren't psychological. Which is typically what people think of, is like, oh, are you crazy? Were you hallucinating? That doesn't actually describe a hallucination, because hallucinations, from what I read, are triggered biologically. Maybe not.
See, it would be closer to epilepsy, it seems to me, than it would a psychological issue. In this, it was talking about like you can actually track a hallucinating brain through different experiments, through the different types of brainwave activity that are going on, and the way neurons are firing. So if you're having tactile hallucinations where like you feel like something's touching you, it's actually because those part of your nerves are interacting with your brain. So your brain really thinks something is touching you. That's interesting, because I get those on my bad arm.
Well, it gets really interesting when I was looking into the like sensory deprivation experiments and stuff, which goes along with the hallucination. And I remember back to that movie in the 70s, like Altered States, where he does the peyote, and then he gets in the like sensory depth tank or whatever, and ends up becoming like a werewolf.
I thought he became a monkey dude.
Or yeah, he like de-evolves or whatever, but he just like they're experimenting with LSD, basically. But it was interesting when I was reading about the different types of sensory depth experiments and things like that, because like the information that's kind of out there is if you do sensory depth, at some point you're going to hallucinate. Like, this is a really common thing. And it turns out there's this test you take before you do sensory depth. And if you score in the top 20 percentile of it, you are like way likely to have certain types of hallucinations. If you score in the bottom 20 percentile of it, you're way more likely to have a certain type of hallucination. Or a different experience, but you will hallucinate. And everybody on the in-between, nothing happens. They usually get bored and like leave the tank. I always thought that like with enough sensory deprivation, like almost everybody has some sort of experience. But the study that I was reading showed that short-term sensory depth, like if you're cutting off your senses, in the short term, you're talking like less than an hour, it's relaxing and it's good for you. Anything over an hour typically causes trauma.
I see, because the longest, and it was minor sensory depth. We did an experiment in my psychology class where she did the headphones and covered your eyes and whatever, and she had everybody in the class do it, like, to see how long they could do it.
So have you ever hallucinated? No?
Not unless I was on something that made me hallucinate.
Wait, do you think this sleep paralysis would
sleep paralysis, yeah.
Does that count as a hallucination, or does that count? Do you think that counts more like a dream state?
I don't know, but I've never had waking hallucinations.
So, but from everything I read, is since it's like neurological, biological that causes legitimate hallucinations, it's interesting. You don't just hallucinate for no reason whatsoever. It usually indicates some sort of damage or lack of information that your brain is trying to fill in. It has very little to do with psychology. The really interesting fun fact I learned is when they were doing the sensory depth experiments, and they were like, they'd get that top 20 percentile and the bottom 20 percentile. They'd get those people in there, and they'd have these like really vivid hallucinations. They'd be like, "Oh, I heard like Jesus talk to me," or the frog god came down and took me to hell, and I went on, and they have this like really vivid thing, and they couldn't distinguish. And like coming out of the tank, they're like, obviously that didn't happen, I was hallucinating. But at the time, like during like their trip, like they couldn't distinguish it from reality, like it was really happening. They took a panel of people that were diagnosed with schizophrenia, which is a psychological disorder with, and I think and I'm not sure, Casey could answer it better, but I guess it also has a chemical component to it as well. But it's mostly psychological, not biological. I guess the jury's still out on it. But anyway,
I say it's both because medication helps it.
Yeah, but they put schizophrenics in the sensory depth tanks, and it turns out almost no schizophrenics will hallucinate while under the influence of sensory deprivation. They would stop hearing voices, they would stop seeing things, feeling things, smelling things, all of it just went away. And so it's kind of weird because when you're talking to people about their paranormal experience, like, and you're assuming that they're like crazy, you're thinking of like schizophrenics, and you're like, okay, well, your story isn't not valid, but credible, like you're not a credible witness. But it turns out that schizophrenic people might be the most credible witness if they say, because most paranormal experiences happen when they're isolated and in kind of sensory depth sort of things, where sensory muted, because they're home alone and the lights are out, there's not a lot of sound, and something happens. Since schizophrenics are shown not to hallucinate due to those environmental situations, when they say, well, yeah, I know I'm schizophrenic, but such and such happened, and I think it was paranormal, it's more credible than when when somebody without schizophrenia says that, because that person is more prone to actually hallucinating.
I'll say, and pretty much everyone who's schizophrenic that I know that's our age understands when they're hallucinating and when they're not. They've been able to train themselves, I guess. I don't know.
So obviously there's different classifications of hallucinations. I'm pretty sure everybody knows what a visual hallucination is going to be. Now, I remember hallucinating one time. It was because I was on a massive amount of narcotics. I can't remember what it was from. Either it was when I injured my foot, or it could have been when I had like my wisdom teeth pulled, or something like that. I don't remember which situation it was. But I used to have this like little basket sitting out in the living room that had the cat's toys in it, and there was this little pink dragon that my cat Chloe liked, and it was just sitting in the top or whatever. And I was laying in bed, and I was like looking out into the hallway or whatever, and I could see that little dragon. and I'm sitting there laying on the bed, and then I just see it like twitch, and I'm like, well, that's crazy. And my first thought was, well, maybe the cat grabbed it or whatever and was like tugging on it. But then I look over and the cat's like looking at me, like, and her eyes are kind of glowing, and I'm like, that's weird. You know, and I'm kind of freaking out for a minute, and then I look back over, and the little stuffed dragon just goes, and I'm like, I think I'm hallucinating. This doesn't seem right. And so I get up and I'm like, this is weird. And I walk over and I'm just staring at this basket, and the doll's just like moving, just like ever so slowly. And I'm like, this isn't real. I know this isn't real, but this looks so cool. And it's just like, and finally I hear my wife from the other room. She's like, what the hell are you doing? Because I'm just standing in the living room, like in my boxers, just looking at this like basket. And I'm like, this fucking dragon's moving. She's like, you're so high. I'm like, this is awesome. It's the only time I've ever legitimately hallucinated. And it was disturbing and awesome, like, at the same time.
I say, Steven called me one time from work and said the soda machine was talking to him. That was a weird day. He'd had some sleep deprivation. But I've never had, like, just full-on awake, sober hallucinations.
Now, have you ever tried hallucinogenic drugs before?
Yeah.
And you didn't hallucinate under those circumstances?
But I was on hallucinogens.
So, is that different? Does that seem different?
Different than what? Because I've never had just normal hallucinations.
I don't know, and that's kind of one of the reasons I want to try hallucinogenics.
I knew I was hallucinating.
Yeah. And I don't know. I guess I don't know if you know you're hallucinating when you're on hallucinogenics.
I did at the time. I don't know if everybody does. I mean, the first time it was pretty confusing.
I like the hallucination. Well, I don't know if it's a hallucination story, but I like the one you told me about Steven in the X kicking in.
Oh. His mom made him go to Walmart.
Yeah.
And he was tripping out, but it hadn't hit yet. Like, he was just scared to go because he'd already taken it.
Because he knew it was coming.
Yeah, and he was fine until he's on the road home. And you know that corner on Pebble Creek that you and Steven usually take the other way, but he had gone straight, and there's Christmas lights. At the end, he got home, and he was like, I just kept driving towards the Christmas lights. I almost wound up in their yard. I was like, don't drive again. But yeah.
Kat says they usually have a normal voice they're used to hearing or a person they're used to seeing, so when it's something different, it stands out. But it even in I guess I'll read it in a minute. But in the sensory depth tank, there was even the absence of their normal psychosis stuff, and you said that's because there's no outside stimuli.
I would think it was because they're reacting to outside stimuli, and if you calm their brain down, it's not firing as it shouldn't.
So the visual hallucinations are usually like really vivid and kind of weird. Like it doesn't make sense. It's the easiest one to kind of set aside.
I had a pretty wicked one time that was.
What was that?
My cloud spirit guide. my cloud spirit guide came to visit me, and it wanted me to fix my life, and it could take me back in time, but it could only take me back in time to points in my life when I was high.
It's like butterfly effect,
but
it's more like the butter high effect.
So, but yeah, that was weird. I woke up the next morning, I was like, that was weird.
It's awesome, and then you're
like, why's my spirit guide a cloud? What kind of crap spirit guide is that?
But the visual hallucinations are the easiest ones to kind of like debunk yourself, because it's like stuff that doesn't fit. And for most of the things I saw is people that are like in the depth tank, what they would see is like either a face or like shapes. For whatever reason, your brain decides to just make geometric shapes.
I would say the first time I got sleep paralysis, that's what I saw. Between flashes of being awake was geometrical shapes. I don't know why. And I was so like,
so that's a common occurrence. So
I
wonder if there's a correlation between like sensory deprivation and the sleep paralysis sort of thing. I wonder if like sitting there with your eyes closed or whatever, like puts you into that sort of state. That would be interesting.
It's if sleep paralysis didn't happen so rarely, I'd like to have the EEG on when it happens, but it's so rare and random.
Simple visual hallucinations, or SVHs, they have an acronym for everything, I love that, are also referred to as non-formed visual hallucinations. Complex visual or CVHs are also referred to as... Anyway, for example, one may report hallucinating a giraffe. A simple visual hallucination is an amorphous figure that have similar shape, color of a giraffe, looks like a giraffe, while a complex visual hallucination is a discrete, lifelike image that is unmistakably a giraffe. So,
I know some people don't know they're hallucinating because that night of the X, some of my friends had taken it in the front yard and they came in and they locked the door because they saw a bear in the front yard. And they were dead convinced there was a bear in our front yard.
And they all saw it.
2 of them saw it. I think because one said, "Hey, there's a bear," and the other went, "Yeah, that's a bear." Totally. In Cleburne, Texas. But I don't know how locking the door was going to help. I'm still lost on that one.
If a group of people experience a complex hallucination, no single individual can be named psychotic or schizophrenic. It's an interesting line here in this whole thing. Complex hallucinations are those of voices, music, or other sounds. This isn't under auditory, by the way. Or other sounds that may not be clear, may be familiar, completely unfamiliar, friendly, or aggressive. So, like, you can just start hearing voices and sounds and things like that.
I've always wondered...
Those would be really hard to kind of recognize.
Well, because I've always wondered, when you're depressed and you have that voice in your head going, "You suck, you're awful." Like, where's the line between that and schizophrenia? Where's the line between that voice in your head that goes, "Everybody hates you, be angry"?
I don't know. It might just be the line between knowing it's there, knowing you're depressed, and like acknowledging that it's there, and like when you start to answer it, maybe. I don't know.
If off voice.
So so obviously there's the visual, there's the audio stuff, and then I ran into these like other things like I never even thought about. There's something called a command hallucination. Command hallucinations are in the form of commands. It can be auditory or inside the person's mind or consciousness.
So that's the schizophrenic who, they get the voice in their head saying the CIA is watching them and they need to kill someone?
Yeah, the contents of the hallucination can range from innocuous commands, cause harm to self or others. Command hallucinations are often associated with schizophrenia. People experience. So it's even though hallucinations are defined as having a biological or a neurological element, it's still tied to the psychosis of the other thing. So crazy people are considered to be hallucinating. It's not like a separate phenomenon. But hallucinations from psychosis do come from neural synapses not firing correctly. Which is really interesting because that kind of goes along with what we were talking about with the EEG thing. You could actually put an EEG on somebody that's got schizophrenia or is having these sort of kind of experiences, and if you're recording it while it happens, you're going to see changes in their neurological signature, and you could, in theory, diagnose somebody as schizophrenic or something based on certain signatures maybe in the future. I don't know. That's just how I'm thinking about it as a non-neuroscientist, and that's probably where like the roots of that whole sort of thing came from. But I just think it's interesting that the go-to for "I saw a ghost" is always, "No, you just hallucinated it." And like there's not... We always kind of blanket over the idea that, no, there are environmental factors that could cause you to hallucinate and see this ghost. And, we talk about like infrasound vibrating the fluid in your eyeballs, and we call it a hallucination, but that's not a hallucination. That's just a physical phenomenon. High EMFs are shown to actually cause hallucination. And that makes sense because EMFs can interrupt the neurons in your brain from firing correctly. So it's a miscommunication between the parts of the brain. But I find it really funny that it's kind of like this like knee-jerk reaction when we're talking to people that think they've had a paranormal experience, and we just kind of ask the simple questions like, "Are you prone to hallucinations, or are you on any kind of medication?" And they're so like kind of offended, like we don't believe them. And it's not. It's
Which is funny because that's the first questionnaire I ran myself through after that incident at Cal. I was like, were you high? Did you have a seizure? Are you crazy?
Well, I don't think people realize how real something like a hallucination can be. So, like, my only experience was that pink dragon moving around. And the thing is the thing I was seeing was so goddamn ridiculous that it was easy to, like, wake up, look at it, and identify it and go, okay, this isn't real. But, like, I was still seeing it. I was still experiencing it. But it was almost like a lucid dream in where, like, I know I'm dreaming, but I'm still in this dream, right? I think if people have a more subtle experience or an experience that relates to something somebody else said they've had, you know, because everybody's heard somebody that says they believe in a ghost. Oh, I was in the shower and I did that and I saw a face in the window. You know, everybody's heard about all these experiences. And even if they sound ridiculous to you now, if you hallucinate it and you experience it for yourself, it seems more tactile. So it's easier for your brain to slip into a mode of going, okay, maybe this is a real thing, but it's hard to pull yourself out of that situation, I think, and say, okay, the body can produce this really real experience even though it's not really happening. And I don't think people really grasp the weight of that, and it offends them because... And that's the whole core of our thing, is where we're saying, no, your experience is valid, but it may not necessarily be the experience you think you were having. And I have a hard time reconciling that to people. And I'm trying to think of new ways to reconcile that to people. It's like, no, I believe you had this experience. I don't think you're crazy, but I don't think it was this thing that happened.
Yeah.
Because I can't remember what I was reading some comments on a video yesterday or something. They're like, no, I totally believe because I've seen and heard for myself. And I'm like, that's not good. That's not a good indicator of whether or not something's real or not.
Because we've both seen and heard for ourselves, yet don't.
Yeah.
Because I know the brain's complicated and weird and not prone to cooperation.
Yeah, and I was reading something the other day. It's like the brain can do 40 billion calculations per second or something, while the world's fastest supercomputer, it would take it 40 minutes to be able to do that. The amount of data, the amount of problem solving that your brain can do in 1 second is damn near unmeasurable. But the thing is it's also prone to making mistakes because it is running so fast. It's the world's... I mean, computers make mistakes and glitch up and screw up. So why would your brain not be susceptible to that same thing? But anyway, that's kind of one of the things that we're doing with the EEG, along with the psychology aspect of it, is, you know, and I plan on talking about it more with Casey on the show. But, you know, we have a questionnaire, like kind of like a psychological questionnaire that kind of gauges like different responses. But while we're doing that, your function now is leaning more towards your, you know, you're doing like the blood pressure, temperature, making sure there's
checking vitals.
Checking vitals. There's no biological stuff, and then we will record brainwaves as different like events are happening and how we respond to the questions and things like that, to see if there's any kind of trend in paranormal experience versus what our bodies and brains are doing at the time. It'd be really interesting to see if there's correlation. Like, do you have any kind of thoughts on what you think we're gonna find, like a theory?
Besides the anxiety.
Yeah, I think that's gonna have a lot to do with it. I was also like, I thought it was really cool on the sensory deprivation experiment. Hold on, let me find the little bit of it. So there's different types of sensory deprivation too. Different tests that they can kind of run you through. There's one called chamber rest. Chamber rest, subject lies on a bed, and it's basically just a dark room. It's almost like a sleep study room. And it's not like this enclosed tank and you're completely cut off or whatever. They get the sounds down below 80 decibels, and usually they leave people in a room for like 24 hours, and they feel it's basically like a good night's sleep, and that counts as sensory deprivation. And most people don't have any kind of hallucinatory things. They have what's called flotation rest, and that's where they put you in the dunk tank, and it's got Epsom salt in it.
Yeah, so you float.
Yeah, and it's at perfect body temperature, so you don't feel the water touching you. And there's enough salt in there, it counteracts. You're so buoyant, it counteracts the effects of gravity. Yeah, it's where you actually like have to struggle to turn around. Let's see, what was the part I was reading that was so freaking cool?
I don't know.
I don't know. I have nothing to say.
Nope.
Nothing at all? Such a dork.
This one's pretty straightforward.
I'm not going to say anything until you say something.
What? What do you want me to say?
I don't know. What do you want me to say? I'm not a monkey. I can't dance for you.
Do you think you'd like doing sensory depth, or you think your anxiety would?
No, I think I'd be fine. It's going into it. I would know the difference and everything, and I'd feel good about it, and probably enjoy the. I want to go into that room where it's like the quietest room in the roller, where you can hear your own biological functions. It's like I can hear my own mitosis, and then people go insane and their heads explode in there, and they got to mop it out every day. The part of the study I was reading is so. They put people in for an average of 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what they sign up for. And it's always more towards the end of the sensory depth experiment that they start to have any kind of visual, audio hallucinations, thing like that. And what they notice is that there's a switch from one brain wave to the other. That's what I was trying to find real quick. I'm trying to remember where I saw it.
I don't know, but didn't you say it was like beta to theta waves?
It's whatever wave. I know it goes to theta. I think it's actually from your I think you switch from high alpha waves to high levels of theta waves, and so they're actually able to remotely track the amount of time you're spending in a hallucinatory state. So what I think would be really interesting is take that out of the sensory depth experiment and put it into the paranormal investigation while we're wearing it, because it'd be like catching lightning in a bottle, because the person having a paranormal experience would just happen to have to be wearing the EEG thing, or we would all have to wear EEGs or something like that. It gets really expensive, so you kind of have to pick somebody at random, like, hey, you're just going to wear this while you do your investigation or whatever, and hope that they have a paranormal experience. But I would like to see if we see the same sort of quick switch between high alpha to high theta, or it might have been high gamma to high theta. I don't know.
I thought it was beta, but
whatever it is, it would be interesting if people that are having a visual, some kind of tactile paranormal experience, you see that brainwave activity spike in that same exact manner. And I think what that would prove is that having a paranormal experience isn't necessarily psychological. It can be that there's a biological component to it, a neurological component to it that causes you to do that.
The question would become, like with EMFs, are the EMFs making you see the ghost, or the EMFs making you more likely to see the ghost?
Are the EMFs making you see a ghost or more likely to see?
Yeah, are they making you see a fake ghost? Or are they making it more likely that you see a real ghost?
Oh, like it opens up your third eye.
Whatever
your
bullshit.
chakra or whatever.
But
well, you just answered it.
No, but I'm saying if you believe in those sort of things.
I don't know. The thing is there's nothing in any of our investigations that have shown any correlation between high EMF and objective activity. That would be the thing.
But I'm saying if the theta waves do like whatever, if we notice that people who have paranormal experiences...
No, I get what you're saying, but that's the point of objectively collecting the evidence. So, if there's no paranormal event that's being recorded, it's only being observed by the person, and you see that switch, and then there's nothing else like on the tapes or the audio or anything at that point in time, you get to a point where you can rule out most activity as a neurological response to lack of stimuli or stimuli. But if you see that sort of response, and you also see a correlation of objectively collected evidence, which is like there's an audio thing that goes with it, or a photo that's taken with it, or any other sort of activity that's happening, and you see that happening over and over again, then I think you're starting to find some kind of correlation between high theta waves and recordable activity, which I think that's the direction you're kind of talking about there. But then, and then you get into, does correlation mean causation?
Julie says, since Sarah is so sensitive to EMF, it would be interesting to have her wear it during prolonged exposure. Then compare that to when she is not being exposed, see what the differences are.
I was kind of thinking the same thing. I wanted to see the effects of EMF on the brain. The one, and I don't know this for sure, but the one caveat I see to that whole thing is the way the EEG works is it's reading the electrical signals in your brain. If I'm shooting a ray gun of EMF at your brain to do that, it could just be picking up on that EMF.
The other caveat is that it makes me absolutely miserable.
Yeah.
It makes me vomit and hurt all over.
I really want to do this experiment now.
Thanks.
Just sounds fun.
You're such an ass. I'll do it, but just once.
We could definitely do it with infrasound too, though, to see how the brain like jumps around and things like that. But your readings so far have been so weird. Like my baselines have been really steady that I've not, which we hadn't recorded any of our baselines yet, but just from playing around with it, like mine's like and all the waves where they're supposed to be. And when I pay attention, the attention meter goes up. When I concentrate on meditation, it goes. Yours is just back and forth all over the place, and I wonder if it has something to do with the nerve damage in your body.
I also wonder if it has to do with TBIs. I had that TBI in when I was working when the client beat my head in with the door, and TBIs can be detected on EEGs. I looked that up earlier.
So is it that not
also I have been diagnosed with epilepsy. I just haven't had anything pop. So
episodes or whatever.
Yeah.
So basically, at the core of it, what we're looking at is the electrical activity in your brain at different levels of your brain, and yours doesn't seem to be functioning in normal parameters.
Well, now I'm curious about it because the doctor I go to, my GP, does like a different kind of EEG, but it does some of the same stuff, and I wonder what he'd say about it. Like, what's going on with that?
I don't, and they probably expect to see that with the types of things you have. Me not being a neurologist, I don't know really what I just know your stuff looks different than all the other stuff I've looked at. But I wonder if like some of that has to do with your CRPS, where your brain is constantly getting pain signals constantly, and I wonder if that's what makes it kind of jump around, because you sit at like at a 5 on a good day anyway. So I wonder if you've lost the ability to have attention and meditation because there's just this part of your brain that's in constant flux like that.
Yeah, I used to be a lot better at paying attention to stuff.
So here's the other question that brings up is if some paranormal activity is a neurological response, right? Instead of psychological but neurological, if you're neurologically impaired because of that situation is what could be showing on that EEG, does that mean you're immune to paranormal experiences now? Because when we first started doing this, when you were first having paranormal experiences, you weren't as far up on the scale of now you're kind of at a completely different place, but you definitely have less paranormal experiences than you used to in the past. I mean, what's your opinion? Do you think it's just you're jaded, or do you think
never thought of that?
Do you think there's a biological?
I'd have to analyze, because the most paranormal experiences I had were before I ever got sick.
Right, and see now it's it's almost like a level of concentration. Like, you might not have a paranormal experience because you can't concentrate on the moment, because there's always a part of your brain that is always focused on the hurting part, I would think.
Yeah. I just don't know. Maybe it's part of column A, part of column B. Isn't that usually where it is? Somewhere in the middle? Part inoculation, part brain damage.
I don't know. I feel like I have less paranormal experiences too, but it comes from a knowledge of what causes different types of activity and stuff where it's been debunked. But I think that causes me to ignore things because I assume I know what the answer to a given event is, and so it gets written off right off the bat. So, like, oh, we hear, like, the footsteps. Oh, it's an animal. But we've stopped checking every time to make sure it's an animal. So, typically, we ignore footsteps. Or, oh, I heard a voice. It's this thing or it's that thing. And then we've stopped debunking it every time because we've debunked it so many times.
I mean, I had that freak out at Needful Things, but never once did I think that was a ghost. I got freaked out, but never once was I like, this is definitely a ghost.
But it was definitely a ghost.
There's probably definitely a raccoon under that pier and beam house.
It was not a raccoon under that pier and beam house. It was a ghost.
Okay.
It was coming to get you.
I'm just saying.
It was scary enough you called us.
Because I thought there was someone in there with. I'm just saying, never did my mind go, this is absolutely something paranormal.
I'm really interested in the sensory depth stuff.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to do the full-on sensory depth thing.
In trying it. Well, I was reading a lot of these things. There's a few so there's actually there's sensory deprivation, which is taking away your senses, either in increments or in whole. You know, where you can touch, take away gravity, smell, taste, sight, all that good stuff. And then there's this other experiment called the Gansfield experiment.
Where they blast you with sensory input?
Kind of, sort of. They like blank it out. So there's this weird phenomenon where, we were talking about it in the car the other day because I almost hit another fucking car.
Oh, yeah, the colors of the cars, and like when the sun's at a certain spot, certain cars are harder to see.
Yeah, and like my brain is like doing this weird thing lately where it's editing out stuff that like I can clearly see, but my brain's like, you don't need that information, don't worry about it. No, that's a car coming at us, I really need to know that.
Well, that's obviously a wide phenomenon, because you get, like, when I was working on the ambulance, you get way more car wrecks like when the sun's setting. It's something about the reflective quality of light.
Sundowners?
I don't know.
Well, so the Gansfield effect is where your brain gets so much sensory input, but it's static, so it starts to edit things out and just replace it. The Gansfield experiments where they put these like goggles on you, and it's just a complete blank color, like 360 degrees, and they like blast it with a light, and then you're usually wearing like headphones, so you can't hear anything. So it's like sensory depth, but you can see, but it's just like a solid color. And it causes people to hallucinate, see things. Usually people do like white or red or something like that, and they'll see faces, geometric shapes, ghostly figures. Same thing you get in sensory deprivation. And this has come up. There was this big study on, I guess these miners got caught in a cave for a few days or whatever, and it was like pitch black, like they didn't have any lights or anything, couldn't see, but they all reported seeing like ghosts in there. And it's because your brain's editing out. So when you do the Gansfield experiment, like with like a red backlight, you see it for a few minutes, and then your brain goes, okay, that's enough, and then you like see nothing, and it's just like, okay, and you start seeing other things because of like that sensory overload. And there's a lot of people that are using that as a paranormal experiment, but I'm not sure what they're proving with it, because they're sitting in there and they're doing it, and then they have like their little hallucinatory experience, but I don't understand exactly how that relates to the paranormal unless they're comparing that
like
data.
I said, unless you're actually catching something along with it, it doesn't. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah, and I guess a lot of people have picked up on it because it's just like a cool experiment to do, and it's like one of the few like sensory depth experiments you can do like at the house or whatever. But I think the next step in that is, do the Gansfield experiment, do the sensory depth experiment, study it with the EEG, but that data needs to be compared to a paranormal experience to see if there's any correlation between the two data.
We got salt in a bathtub.
You turn out the lights and dump a shit ton of Epsom salt in the bathtub and go sitting there playing some Yanni. And I don't know. I guess that's how you do it.
I don't know. It sounds boring. It sounds mind-numbingly boring.
It can't be any more boring than this episode.
Julie had a question.
What's the question?
Read it.
Which one?
The last one?
So since your belief system has changed, your ability to experience the paranormal has changed. I think so. Like, and that's what you and Kat were blasting me on yesterday, is I'm not open to experiences anymore because I've shat on so many of my own past experiences, I guess. But I follow scientific method. Like, I'm not expecting a certain outcome at the end of the experiment. Like, I'm open to whatever the data shows.
I think you're playing a measuring game over who's the most logical.
No.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Whatever you say.
Stop it. I'm not. I go where the data shows me. I was teasing yesterday. You're a bitch.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You're a straight bitch.
I don't know what you mean, sir.
By the way, Sarah bought me animal cookies today.
Frosted animal cookies.
Frosted animal cookies, the grandma brand.
Mother's brand.
It's got a grandma on the front. Since I ate your animal cookies. No, I think I'm still open to the idea of a paranormal experience. We haven't caught any evidence like we have in a long time because our controls have tightened up.
And I don't think personally that my ability to experience the paranormal has changed. I think what I think it is has changed.
Yeah, like my belief in the idea that the paranormal is a thing that's happening has not changed at all. I think there are things that are happening. I just think I have better explanations for them. Like, I think until I verbalize it just now, I hadn't thought of it in this way. But I think I've shifted from the idea of if you see... I think when people see a ghost or whatever, they may actually be seeing a ghost. But the thing is the reason I may see something and you don't see something is because it doesn't occupy this three-dimensional space, right? It exists in another dimension of sort of space, so that I'm able to perceptualize it. Like, I can see it and view it, but it's almost like it's projected into my mind. And so I'm seeing something that exists in this space, but it's not in this three-dimensional space. It's more like two-dimensional space, I guess. And that thing could really be happening. I could really be seeing it, and it's not a hallucination. But we can't experience it at the same time unless, certain factors like line up. That sort of thing. So there's paranormal things, but my idea about the mechanics of how those things work, I don't think that there's spirits occupying three-dimensional space jumping out and going boo anymore.
Are walking around.
Yeah, I definitely don't think that. But we have got evidence of intelligent things that talk and communicate back sometimes. And it's real sporadic, so it's only loosely evidence. There's just evidence that there's something there that can be picked up on, but not repeatable, like in any sort of regular fashion. I don't discount that. I don't discredit the fact that those things can be picked up on, but I don't think we understand what they are. I don't think it's like the human soul or a demon or anything like that. I think it's something that doesn't exist in that bit of time space.
Alien is the correct term. It's just not what people think when they say
it's just something
alien.
we don't understand. Like it could even be a form of time dilation. We could be communicating with ourselves like 30 seconds from the future and not realize it because there's some kind of gravitational distortion or something that's like not really understood. But yeah, I don't know. I don't feel like I'm like closed off to the idea. I think I've evolved in my thinking about, is this a magical, mystical thing by the means of some intelligent else in the
Yeah,
universe
no.
doing it? No, I don't think that, but
Me either.
you have any other thoughts about, like, I mean, how important do you think this, like, neuroscience part of our experiment is to what we're doing? I mean, I think it's different than what any other group has really tried to go in to explain. So we still do the same things other groups do, and we're trying to, like, capture paranormal activity, but I think we're taking a different stride in the fact that we're trying to explain what the paranormal activity is. I think that's the missing component that bothers me about paranormal investigation as a whole. I think that's what's always irked me about it, is it's like, hey, I got this voice on a tape, and it's like, well, explain what that thing is. Well, it's a spirit. Well, you don't know that. It's like, explain what it is. Well, we can't. And I'm like, then you're not really doing anything but capturing voices. Like, I want an answer to what could cause this. Whether it's the answer I like or not, I would like a list, please, of possible things. I think the neuroscience and psychological aspects of it are very important, and I think it helps make us more credible in that we're looking outside the explanation of, hey, we're just hearing voices and
I
seeing
think
things.
they're important. However, I do not think we as a group have the skills and knowledge base necessary to interpret the data we're collecting.
Right. Which is what I said from the beginning, is that we're just collecting the data. The data is there, and we need to make sure we're collecting it correctly. And later on, we can see correlation, and then we can talk to experts in those fields and say, hey, help us interpret what this means. And then you might find this, like, really logical or illogical answer that leads to some other form of investigating. But I don't see anybody else doing it.
Does anyone have a neuroscientist in your pocket? No.
Problem is, those people make way too much money to waste their time on paranormal studies, so
Yeah.
we kind of have to head it up and then just, hit them at the bar. Hey, think ghosts are a thing? No, check this out. I don't know. I think it's really fascinating. And I guess it's really hard to do, like, a podcast about that to yours. Everybody wants to know about it, but trying to talk about it's hardly entertaining, I think. I've almost dozed off twice during this episode.
And I don't have the knowledge base to talk about it properly or even understand it properly.
Well, you looked up the different kind of... What do the different kind of brainwaves actually mean? Like, what are we going to be looking at?
Okay, so
earlier I was talking, it goes from it switches from one kind to theta waves suddenly, and that indicates a lot of times hallucinations.
Okay,
but what are we talking about?
Theta waves occur most often in sleep, but are also dominant in deep meditation. Theta is our gateway to learning, memory, and intuition. In theta, our senses are withdrawn from the external world and focused on signals originating from within. It is that twilight state which we normally only experience fleetingly as we wake up or drift off to sleep. In theta, we are in a dream, vivid imagery, intuition, and information beyond our normal conscious awareness.
So when you suddenly just jerk into that theta, high theta wave state, that means that the sensory input you're getting is actually internal. It's your body has decided it's not taking in sensory information externally anymore, and now everything you get is from yourself, from your own biological things going on.
Delta waves are slow, loud brain waves, low frequency, and deeply penetrating like a drum beat. They are generated in the deepest meditation and dreamless sleep. Delta waves suspend eternal awareness and are the source of empathy. Healing and regeneration are stimulated in this state. That is why deep restorative sleep is so essential to the healing process. And alpha waves are dominant during quietly flowing thoughts. That was the one that was saying it's another meditative one.
Okay.
Alpha is the power of, like, being in the moment, and it's a resting state for the brain. Alpha waves aid overall mental coordination, calmness, alertness, mind-body integration, and learning. Now, beta waves are the big one. That's your normal, I'm awake, I'm doing stuff, it's around in consciousness when attention is directed towards cognitive tasks and the outside world. Beta is a fast activity present when we are alert, attentive, engaged in problem-solving, judgment, decision-making, or focused mental activity.
Now, here's something I think would be interesting to our study, right? If we're looking at people's what waves are highest at the points that they're having paranormal experience, sounds like if they have high beta wave activity when they have a paranormal experience, they're having a paranormal experience because they are more alert to their surrounding. And that would be an interesting thing, because we've had that conversation about, like, when you're anxious, your body goes into this mode where it's hyper. We tend to think of people who are anxious and jumpy as unreliable witnesses because they're anxious and jumpy. But it's interesting because they're actually more aware of their surroundings because they're in that kind of survival mode. Mm-hmm. So it'd be really interesting to see if somebody says, well, I saw an apparition in there, and we go back and look, and their beta waves were at high instead of their theta.
Because beta waves are further divided into 3 bands. Low beta can be thought of as a fast idle or musing. Beta 2 is high engagement or actively figuring something out. High beta is highly complex thought, integrating new experiences, high anxiety or excitement. Continual high frequency processing is not an efficient way to run the brain, as it takes a tremendous amount of energy.
Yeah, it's like overclocking your processor on a computer. Yeah, it'll run faster, but it's running hotter, and it's making more mistakes.
And the last one's gamma, the most subtle brainwave frequency. The mind has to be quiet to access gamma. It was dismissed as spare brain noise until researchers discovered it's highly active or in states of love, altruism, or higher virtues, it quotes. Gamma is also above the frequency of neuronal firing, so how it is generated remains a mystery. It is speculated that gamma rhythms modulate perception and consciousness, and that a greater presence of gamma relates to expanded consciousness. There you go.
So, on the offshoot that we can get an EEG on somebody while they're having a paranormal experience, what do you think is going to be more active? Theta, beta?
I think with our group, the high beta one. Because I think most of the stuff we experience is purely anxiety related.
But you're in that state of high alertness, though. Does that still contribute
it's
to
that question again? Is the highly alert thing making you prone to seeing stupid stuff, or are you actually seeing real stuff because your reflexes are better? I don't know.
I think if your beta is high, then it's signifying that you're seeing something that's really there in that physical space, or hearing something in that physical space.
Just because you're seeing something your brain thinks is really there doesn't mean it's really there.
If your theta is high,
I caught the corner of a doorway. It looked like a person. These are things that happen.
Right, that's something in that physical space. That I get.
I'm thinking that anxiety makes you more prone to seeing shapes and things that are really there. So that would be beta. I get
that. No, that makes sense. I get that. But I'm thinking more in the terms of you're sitting in a blank room, not...
All I can think is, I'm glad I'm a beta. I can't do the...
What?
Oh, Brave New World. You know, where they give them all the letters and they make them convinced that they're the best. Have you never read Brave New World?
Mm-mm.
Oh, dear Lord. Never mind. Just forget it.
I mean, I know what it is. I'm not stupid, but no, I have not sat down and read it. It's a big freaking book.
It's like 80 pages. It's a novella.
What? No, it's like that thick.
No.
Brave New World?
No, it's like 90 pages. It's not even 100 pages.
I don't know. Have you read Kite Runner yet?
No.
You need to read Kite Runner.
But anyway, I think a lot of what we see is actually there. I just think our brain's misinterpreting.
Right, because it's trying to process it too quickly. It's
especially considering
it's like door with a demon.
Especially how often we spend with someone accidentally flashing a light in our face, or a camera flash going off, or in nature where things are blowing around and stuff like that. I think for us that's going to be the main thing we see. But I mean, prove me wrong. I'd be interested to see if I'm wrong, and it's the theta thing. That'd be cool.
I'm really interested to see what the average high wave is during experiences that we're perceiving as possibly paranormal. Along
Now that's
with
with
what are
our
vital.
group, but with some other people I know, I'd be more prone to thinking it's the other.
What would be really interesting is to give like a ghost tour or something like that, where somebody in the group was wearing a random person was wearing a headset, and then you take from a sample like that. It'd be really cool to kind of get that data. The other thing you can do is, you take all your baselines, and then you have somebody wear like a VR headset, like we're talking about doing, and you play different types of like movies, and you would start with like something like calm and serene or whatever, and then you would go to the war scenes or whatever, and you go, you kind of go back to a baseline, but then you have like something kind of like creepy where like it goes.
First 5 minutes of Saving Private Ryan.
Yeah.
Scenes from The Grudge.
Or that scene from Signs where the alien just freaking walks out. And
Yeah.
You're like, ah, oh my god! Like the little needles just going up and down. Get me out of this!
But that's basically what they do in fMRI studies. We're just doing it with an EEG, which is less adept, but it still.
Sorry,
serves the same,
I couldn't afford the fMRI.
It still serves the same fun. Yeah, you're going to carry an MRI machine around with this. We're going to need a trailer.
I'd be down. I just thought it would be cool if we owned medical equipment, and that seemed the most, logical one to buy. So we use medical equipment. No, I'm all for it. I think it's cool, but it's hard for me to like make it sound super exciting. It's super exciting, actually. It's just really hard for me to make it sound like really interesting. It's like, hey, we're gonna measure brain waves while we're looking at haunted houses. Woo!
Ghost hunting overall is boring.
I don't know. So so next week we're probably not going to do a podcast because we are going to Yoakum, Texas, and we're probably going to be the last paranormal group to get to investigate the hospital, because the hospital is getting sold, I found out. But I just sent them all the money today, and that's going to be really entertaining because there's 3 floors in a basement that your dad refuses to go into.
He says he doesn't like basements. But it will be the biggest location we've ever done. So
it's the biggest location we've done. We will be live streaming it, and we will have a crap ton of cameras sitting around. We will be doing a lot of isolation experiments and a lot of psychological stuff. And what I think, it's going to be an interesting investigation for us as a group, because it'll be one of the few places where we can spread out and be isolated from each other.
Yeah.
As a group. Because I've got some like real anxiety about being on that 3rd floor or in that basement, like on my own.
Huh.
What's that?
Over-arousal of certain brain areas is linked with anxiety disorders, sleep problems, nightmares, hypervigilance, impulsive behavior, anger, aggression, agitation, depression, chronic nerve pain, and spasticity. Under-arousal in certain brain areas leads to some types of depression, attention deficit, chronic pain, and insomnia. A combination of under-arousal and over-arousal are seen in cases of anxiety, depression, and ADHD.
Yeah, one of the things, so there's like all these different apps you can get that work with our EEG, things like that, and of course you can write your own programs. I saw a lot of wellness apps where it was like for pain management and things like that. So it's like a brain trainer or whatever, but you're supposed to be able, if you do the exercise with it every day and you learn to control your brain, supposedly you're supposed to be able to control your pain levels with it.
That's what, when I did that class at UT, a lot of it was biofeedback.
Yeah, that was a thing, biofeedback.
But it's just interesting that it puts chronic pain in with both sets. With
too high or
too low.
Too low.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting.
I wonder if chronic pain causes it. Well, that's her causation thing. Is the chronic
one cause
pain.
the other, or the other cause that. Yeah. I never know. I don't know. It's
really interesting, but I'm pretty stoked to do the Yoakum investigation next week. So we'll be streaming that not tomorrow Saturday, but next Saturday is when we'll be in there. And that's going to be a pretty lengthy sort of investigation. And then this week I'm working on the Hood County Jail stuff. So I'm really hoping that I can get that episode done in a week. So that should be really cool. That's about it. That's all I got for the show.
Thoughts?
I'm real low on energy today, is what my problem is. I was actually kind of excited to do this, and then I started talking about it, and I realized how freaking boring it sounded. It sounded so much better in my head when I was sitting here reading. Why are you so mean to me?
Because I can.
I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything at all.
I brought you animal cookies.
Whatever. All right.
Thanks for watching.
Everybody have a great night.